I was supposed to close. I had a buyer. We were supposed to close March 18th. We shut down in Massachusetts on March 15th.
Oh.
Yeah. So the original buyer got very cold feet. And I mean, I don't blame him. I really don't. If the shoe were on the other foot, I would have been like, yeah. So this is where having a broker was amazing. I'll talk about that process in a second.
I'm excited to share your story. Before we dive into the studio and how you came to buy the studio and then sell the studio, talk to us about who you are. Give us your background. Where are you from? What was your career path like?
Okay. Well, I'm originally from California. I am a California girl. And if you would have told me, 20 years ago that I would be living in Ohio by way of Massachusetts, I would have said, no way in hell. I mean, lifelong California. I grew up in Monterey on the Central Coast. And I guess my roots in entrepreneurship go back because I grew up working for my dad. He managed a business and then eventually branched out and opened his own business. And I started working for him from the time some of my earliest memories are going to the store and the retail store and, breaking boxes down and doing chores and all that kind of stuff. And he would pay me with merchandise and take me out for a burger. I have vivid memories of sitting at the Poppy Cafe, having a burger and a vanilla milkshake with my dad. And so he was very, definitely my first boss, my first mentor, and an amazing individual. And I learned so much from him, just not only about, being a good citizen, but life and business. And I realized that many of the lessons I learned ultimately served me when I bought my own business. Who knew? So I went to school and I graduated from UC Santa Barbara with a degree in liberal studies. I was going to be a teacher like my mother, and just sort of ended up deciding to take a break. And as my father said, well, okay, if you're not going to be in school, then how are you going to support yourself? I went, oh. So I started working for a retail store, which is in the same industry that my father's business was in. And after being there for 3 years, this is the mid 80s, he said, well, if you're going to stay in the industry, somebody had just left the company. He said, I could really use your help. And my brother was working for him at the time as well. So I really grew up in a family-owned business. And I understand what it takes to have your own business. And so from there, I worked for him for a number of years. And then, I fell in love and got married and moved to the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area, which meant that I had to stop working for my dad. So, and then I ended up staying in the same industry. In fact, towards the end, I went into sales and marketing, and I worked for a major wholesaler in the industry that I had grown up in. And at the end of my sales career, professional career, my brother at the time, because my father had retired, was one of my customers. It was a little bit conflict of interest, but the company kind of just turned a blind eye to that. So I was I worked for a Fortune 500 company. I managed a very, very large volume sales territory in the Silicon Valley, San Francisco. I went from San Jose all the way up to Healdsburg, California, from basically the Bay Area to Sacramento. So if you're from California, you're familiar with that geography. So it was dollar volume wise, it was a very large dollar territory. I basically managed the equivalent of a small corporation. And so I gained a lot of experience in obviously sales and marketing, but also, managing and budgeting. I was a remote worker. This was back in, the 90s, 80s and 90s. And other than going into monthly sales meetings, I worked from home. It was like, here are your numbers. This is what your contribution to the company has to be. This is how you're paid for it. And we were paid on what was called EBIT. Everything was worked on EBIT, earnings before income tax. So we were an operations logistics company. And basically I sold our marketing and logistical services. And in about 02, I was undoing an I do, as I like to say. And it was a time of reevaluation. I was in my mid 40s, early 40s. And I was like, oh gosh, it got a bit contentious. And so my sister dragged me she doesn't say she dragged me, but I say she dragged me to my first hot yoga class at Thanksgiving in '02. I hated it. I positively hated it. I was like, WTF. What the
Terri, I have to jump in here because I also hated hot yoga.
Yeah.
I like break out in hives in hot yoga.
So, and I was totally unprepared because I was wearing long sweatpants, cotton sweatpants and a t-shirt, and it was right before Christmas, so the room was very full. But I remember there was this one woman in the front row that went down in this particular posture, and I just remember she was so amazing. She was so strong, so powerful. So I have no idea who she is. I never knew her name, never saw her again, but I still remember it like it was yesterday. And this was like almost 20 years ago. I was like, I want to do that. Because I'm a little bit competitive, if people would tell me. I want to do that. But that was like the only positive moment in the entire 90-minute class. But afterwards, I felt so much better. It's like I had this 1,000-pound gorilla on my back for months, stressed out about everything. Anybody who's been through that, undoing a marriage knows how painful that can be. And for those 90 minutes, that gorilla was gone. I didn't, because I was just trying to survive class. I wasn't thinking about anything about making it to the next. And that was like the mental aspect of the yoga was like, and I went back. My sister never did, although she took one class when I became a teacher. And then I just started practicing regularly, and I fell in love with hot yoga. And so I started practicing regularly, and then in about '04, there have been some major changes in our organization. The tech bubble had bust. So that's why I say if sales are flat or down, you reduce expenses. Overnight, I had like $20 million gone from my sales territory. I mean, just the companies were gone. It wasn't like I lost the business to a competitor. They just, all the venture capital money started drying up, right? You're doing really, really well, but then it crashed. My mother always said I was her child that would run and jump into the deep end of the pool before checking to see if there was water in the deep end. And then I go, wow, that was fun. Let's do it again, kind of stuff. So I just decided to do it. I wasn't married, didn't have kids. I thought, what the heck? So I packed my house up, rented it, took my dogs to my parents for 9 weeks, which ended up being 9 years, but that's another story, and went off to a 9-week intensive teacher training in Los Angeles. And that was '05. And then after that, I just started teaching yoga. And I ended up teaching overseas for a number of years. I was in Hong Kong, I was in Malaysia, I taught Mexico, I taught New York City. Oh, that was fabulous. Hong Kong was absolutely loved it. And I was teaching there when my father really started to decline. So I came home, and then he eventually, and he passed. And I ended up staying in California with my mom for the year after my dad died. And then I'm like, okay, I really need to start looking. And that's when I went overseas again. I was teaching in Malaysia. And then I came back in '09, and I was kind of kicking about for what I was going to do next and where I was going to go. And the one thing I will say right here is, as a yoga teacher, you do not make a lot of money. So that was a whole nother thing, is now really adapting my lifestyle to a much diminished income. But I loved it. I loved what I was doing. I was passionate about teaching. I loved helping people. I was actually teaching. That's what I wanted to do in college, right? So it's kind of come full circle back to that. I wasn't teaching, primary school, which I had planned. I was teaching big kids, adults, which I think sometimes can be even more challenging. And so that was '09. And then a friend of mine said, hey, I think a friend of ours, a mutual friend of ours, and I'm in California this whole time other than traveling and teaching, back in Massachusetts. She had just opened a studio, needed some help. Her daughter had just been diagnosed with cancer. And so I called her up and she said, yeah, that'd be great. Why don't you come back? You can stay with me. And so I went back for 4 months. That was 2009. And I just left Massachusetts in August. So it just ended up by happenstance. I ended up in Massachusetts. Totally. I wasn't planning to move there. I was going to help a friend for a few months to get through a rough patch. But when I got back there, I started teaching at other studios. And within a couple of months, I was teaching full time. I had to buy a car because I hadn't had a car since I went overseas in 05 or 06, whenever it was. And so I bought a car and I just kind of settled in and started teaching. And then in 2011 is when one of the studios I was teaching at was opening another studio. And they asked me that if I wanted to be their manager and manage the two studios. Because one of the things that I did do once I started getting back there is based upon the fact that it is challenging to be a full-time yoga teacher in terms of income. Now, at this point, keep in mind, I'm in my early 50s. So retirement is looming much larger in front of me. So I repped a yoga clothing. My background, obviously, sales and marketing. So I repped a line of yoga clothes. And I did what was called trunk sales, where I would literally put the stuff in my car. I would make the appointment. I would go. I would sell the product. And then I made a commission off of everything I sold. And usually when I would go, I would actually teach a class or two. So I would get paid to teach. I would make some income. I got to travel all over the Northeast, and that was super fun. I really enjoyed doing that. But again, I'm back to driving all these miles. I'm like, oh my gosh, I got out of sales. But what I quickly realized is that I'm destined to do this. And see, I never wanted to own a studio. I had some of my friends with teacher training. They knew absolutely that that's what they wanted to do. They wanted to get their hours in and they wanted to open a studio. I was like, no. I grew up in small business. I understand what it takes to be an entrepreneur. I worked plenty of times when my dad would give me my paycheck and then hand me $100 and say, don't cash this till Friday. But I also knew that if I wanted to stay in the yoga world, which I knew I wanted to do, if I wanted to stay in the health and fitness, which I loved, that perhaps studio ownership was the path. Because while you're not necessarily going to set the world on fire, although there are very, very successful studios out there that do really well, I knew that it could provide a comfortable living. And that's what I was looking for. I wasn't looking to be the next Yoga Works or something like that. I just wanted to provide for myself, save for retirement, and live a good life, be a good person. Along about that time, the woman that I bought the studio from after her partner had died the year before was to the point thinking, okay, maybe it's time to sell the studios. So we kind of, unbeknownst to each other, I was thinking maybe it's the time to buy, and she's thinking, and I wasn't even thinking about that studio. I mean, I love the studio I bought. It's like I've been teaching there since we opened in 2011. So I managed the place. I knew the place. I knew the clients. It was 3.2 miles from my apartment. So that was beautiful. It didn't take me long to get there, even in the wintertime. So I love the community, and I've been a part of it for the last 4 years anyway. And so it just worked out that it came about that we, decided that the time was right for both of us. And we put the deal together so quickly that nobody knew. It was like 3 weeks from start to finish is really what it was. I robbed from my retirement. I had retirement money set, obviously from my previous life. And there we have it. And I set upon the path of studio ownership, one of the things I never thought I would do.
That's awesome. I love that.
So that is sort of how I got to where I'm at.
What year did you buy the business again, Terri?
I bought the business in January of 2015.
Okay. And then you sold
I sold it in July of last year. So just about 5.5 years.
Okay, great. Awesome. So we're going to skip ahead a little bit to the sale of the business. Right. at what point did you start thinking about it? And then what was that process like? I know you hired a broker.
Yep.
So talk about how you chose your broker, what that process was like working
Okay.
with the broker, all that good stuff.
So I will say that I knew when I signed the documents on January 16th, 2015, that I was going to sell my business one day. Right. And I know one of the benefits of being, an entrepreneur is that you can like take some cash and put it in your pocket and not record it. So you don't have to pay taxes on it. And yeah, there's some, truth to that for sure. However, you're shortchanging yourself because if you're not accounting for that cash, when you go to sell your business, you are devaluing your business. And if you're pulling out a ton of cash, yeah, you may say my business is worth $500,000, but your books show 250,000. And so you've just shortchanged yourself. So those are a couple of things is that I knew from day one. It's like I was planning to sell the business. So I treated it as such. And I set out some long-term goals as to where I wanted to be in each year. What accelerated the timeline of selling was my mother did pass in 2019, and that was really. I mean, I was very close to my mom, very close to all my family, and it just sort of shifted my thinking a lot. So it was interesting. So 2019 professionally was a phenomenal year. I hit every goal that I'd set for the studio back in 2015. I had hit my revenue goal. I had hit the number of classes goals. I had hit my membership, how many members I wanted to have. I had hit my profitability goal. I was literally blowing my numbers off the charts. And people were like, I was sustaining 20-30% year over year growth. And usually you don't hit that at a business that's been around for 8 or 9 years. I was like, just cranking. The studio was humming. We had added classes. I had added teachers. I had added different types of yoga. We had waitlist policies and no shows. I mean, we had people waitlisted for classes, and it was going gangbusters. And at the same time, personally, I was in a fog, and just trying to keep it all together. And that summer, I signed up for a mastermind. And the other thing that through also all of this is I had a business coach. Because even though with all my experience and everything, it's like I think the biggest thing of entrepreneurship is being held accountable. And having that check-in call and having that person to bounce ideas off of. Because, the other thing is, as much as we want to think this, but yes, you have a good relationship with employees, but your employees aren't your friends. And your employees, you can't really share like financial information with them. You can give them what what you want with the projections and things like that, but you're not going to share, sensitive financial information with them. Whereas with a business coach and a mentor, you can. And so that was very integral. I was doing pretty well the first few years, but man, when I got hooked up with my business coach, that is when I really, because now all of a sudden it's like I had someone helping me stay accountable, and I needed that structure because again, I was the kid that was always doing the homework the night before it was due. And if I didn't have a due date, then it probably wouldn't get done. So now all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, I'm meeting with my coach today. I got to get this stuff done. Right. So even if I didn't, it was nobody's fault but mine. And it's not like, it was just like, okay, I got to get this done. So that was really, really very, very helpful for me. And actually what kind of led to what I'm going to be doing now, which is consulting as well. And talking with this mastermind group I was with, and I was just like, we're talking about different things. And it was actually somebody on the mastermind, because I was talking about, the professional side. And then I was having some other issues within the company. And again, I think a lot of that was just because of the space I was in with employees. And I think part of that was because of the space I was in. And it was like, people were giving me advice, like in the mastermind, we would say our problem and they would listen, they would ask questions and then kind of go around and say, hey, if I were you, this. And one of the persons said, I think you should sell. She's like, the best time to sell your business is when you're at the top. that the best time, and it's true, the best time you sell your business is when things are booming. Oh, let me think about it. And it was kind of like that 1,000-pound gorilla was kind of coming off my back. As much as I loved what I was doing, I just was like, I felt it was time. And and also I was like, really want to be closer to family. I just really want to be close to family. So that was sort of the impetus. And it's like, I had planned to sell the business, but it was a little sooner. But it's like, you know what? Why not? And oh my gosh, thank God, because we had this little thing called the pandemic. I was supposed to close, I had a buyer. We were supposed to close March 18th.
Mm.
We shut down in Massachusetts on March 15th.
Oh.
Yeah. So the original buyer got very cold feet. And I mean, I don't blame him. I really don't. If the shoe were on the other foot, I would have been like, eh. So this is where having a broker was amazing. I'll talk about that process in a second. Never despaired. And we did sell the business in the middle of the pandemic. And partly it was because of all that other work I had done. Yes, I did not get the same price that I had originally sold it for. I was reconciled to that. It's like the world had changed, as everybody knows, right? So I was just thankful that like you said, that I was actually able to sell and get my money out of it, right? Did I get what I wanted, what I'd hoped for, what I thought I was going to get back in March? No. But having known people that are closing their doors and all that, I'm like, I was just beyond grateful that I was actually, and this buyer knew she was buying it in the middle of the pandemic, understood that. And what helped sell the business was because of all these other things and memberships, because when the doors closed, right, we were only closed one day. And immediately we started doing live streaming classes. First, we did it on Facebook for free. And then I figured out a way with some of my technology partners, that we were able to get it so it was monetized. The members can use their memberships. And so I went to a complete virtual platform. And within a week, we were back to offering. It was interesting. I was offering the exact same number of classes that I offered in 2015 when I bought the studio. We still had like 23 classes a week, 7 days a week on the schedule. Then we started to do the on demand. So we started recording those, and we're doing all of that stuff. And because of all the work I had done prior to 2020, right? All of those things in place and having a solid membership base, the studio was still doing well. It was not what it was in 2019, but it was breaking even. We were not losing money, right? And so that is the other thing about having a solid plan and having money in the bank, because I had the resources to be able to keep things going, and pay my employees and pay my rent on time and all of that, because I had the reserves in the bank based upon working a plan and having how much money is going to go, having accounts where I put money for savings. I put money for not just fair. I had a tax account. I followed this plan called Profit First, and I had a profit account. I had a tax account. I had a payroll account. So the money was in there. This is a total shout out to MindBody, because they helped me grow my business. I attended my first MindBody University in 2016. And that really helps you understand not just the software, but how do you use the software to help support your business. And I went back I went to a number of different MindBody universities. I got to know people, and this mastermind group that I was in were all people who were all but one we all met through MindBody. And so I started networking with other studios, the MindBody One, which is a peer-to-peer community. I got very active in that. And it was through MindBody, the MindBody One, MindBody peer community, that I met my broker, Mitch McKinley, and got to know him on a personal level. And it just made sense to go to Mitch, because he had sold a studio. He was a yoga teacher. He owned a yoga studio, and it was a really good fit. So that's how, but I would say it was because of the professional network that I had networked with. And that's how I met these different people. And I knew Mitch. I trusted Mitch. I knew what his resume was like and how he'd helped other studios. So I felt very comfortable going with them, as opposed to just going online and talking to business brokers, somebody you don't know. That I think is also really important as a business owner, is to do that networking. And he helped me value the business, and what the valuation of the business was. He was there every step of the way with me. Very, constant communication. Everything that needed to be done. The non-inventory asset inventory, because they're buying not only the goodwill, but the memberships, the reports that you need. And again, this is where having all that data and having run my business like a business from day one paid off, because I could show, yes, this is what the business is worth. Here are my tax returns. Here's my P&L, right? And it's all there. There was no like, oh, but it really does take in this. And also I was able to show, these are my memberships. And again, the mind body reporting is so easy to do. Here's my membership base. This is how much my memberships bring in, my recurring revenue brings in, because that is the holy grail, is the recurring revenue. So this is how much the recurring revenue brings in. This is how much retail sales bring in. This is how much class card, all of that detail and data was there. So it made it like very simple when someone said, well, what about this? And obviously when the original deal fell through, Mitch didn't give up hope. And we found the other buyer, and and then we got it past the goal line. We got it through the finish line.
That's amazing to sell a business in the middle of a global pandemic. That's pretty amazing.
Yes. And now I'm even more grateful, because the world obviously has changed a lot. When I decided to sell the studio, it was like, okay, now I will really get in the consulting part of it, because I always did enjoy when I would go network with people, because I learned a lot about the software, and also just in business in general, just, my background. I was already kind of consulting. People would call me and say, hey, I've got this. What, how can I do this? I'm like, well, all you got to do is blah, 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 blah. I'm like, oh gosh, thank you so much. So I really enjoyed that part of it. So I feel that as a consultant or a coach, you're still in that space of educating. You're still in that space of helping people, of being of service. And I think that is that was the next evolution for me, is now I am truly going to be doing that. And whether or not I'll go back to teaching, I don't know. I'll be honest, I was not a big fan of teaching online. I did it because I had to.
Yeah.
It's very different. And I really appreciate people who do it and do it well. I mean, people told me I do it fine, but it's just like, so I don't know if I would teach locally or not. I've been asked a couple of times, hey, would you like to teach for me? Because now you could teach anywhere in the world. I'm like, yeah, no, not really. Whether or not, I don't know. But certainly I feel that I still have something to contribute. I mean, maybe that's hubris, but I still feel I have something to contribute with my experience. And I like to think I kind of sort of know what I was doing, because I did
it sounds like you definitely know what you were doing.
Business, I took it from X and brought it to Y, and again, it wasn't perfect, and there were a lot of bumps and a lot of things I would do differently this time around, if I ever were. In fact, there's a strip mall at the end of my block. I live in a really nice neighborhood, and then there, just across the street, it's literally like right down the end of the block. On the other side of the main boulevard, there's a strip mall, and it's obviously been, the construction stopped because of COVID. And one day my sister and I were walking by, and I said, gosh, because I know this area a little bit more now.
You're getting the bug.
Demographically, it's like the socioeconomic demographic that would be good. And I went, wow, that would be a really good place for a yoga studio. My sister looked at me and she slapped me. She said, remember what you told me? What you said? I'm like, okay, right. No,
yes, we need those people to keep us honest and accountable.
Yeah. But yeah, so
that is awesome. Well, Terri, I so appreciate your time. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us.
Oh, you're welcome.
I'm excited to share it, and I know it will inspire others to think differently as they launch and grow their business.
Yeah, I think, the most important thing is have a plan from day one. Think about selling, get mentors, get coaches, get accountability. I mean, those are the things that for me was when I really started to see the business grow. I mean, I was doing all right on my own, but I know that I would not have achieved what I achieved from 2017 to 2019 if I had not tapped into that because of the single for me. Now, I know there are people who are very much, but for me, it was the accountability, having someone to bounce ideas off of, having someone, like you said, to keep me in check and like, whoa, 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 cowgirl, let's take a step back. Like I almost was going to get a second location in 2018 because of we were busting at the seams. I'm like, oh my God, people are going to start canceling their memberships because they can't get in the class. And my coach and co-host, she said, whoa, 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 let's look at this. And we walk, and I'm like, oh, you know, particularly for someone who likes to jump in the deep end without water, that was, you know, someone to rein you back in as well.
Yeah.
Not only accountability, but to kind of be that voice of, let's talk about this. And it's better than it's somebody that, you know, it's not your significant other, your spouse, a friend. It's someone that within the industry that has that insight and knowledge and ability to say, let's take a step back. So that's what I would, you know, leave anybody with who wants to have their own business, those things, and just be prepared. There's no such thing as vacations either.
So true. So true.
Yeah. No
well,
vacations.
thank you again, Terri, for your time.